TRC EDC here, back again with another knife video. You may be wondering why I already have this apart. This is the Benchmade Bailout, as you can see. I took it apart because I still was getting some grittiness. As you may know, on my Bugout, the grittiness went completely away, and it's completely drop shut when you pull the axis lock back. However, that was not the case on the Bailout. And since it has similar construction, I figured there is something up with what's inside. And so I went ahead and decided I'm going to take this apart. Now, I've never taken apart an axis lock before. I know people have said it's annoying or difficult to do. They weren't kidding. It is hard. But I thought that I'd go ahead and put a video together showing you what may be helpful to you when you take apart an axis lock knife, and specifically the Benchmade Bailout here. So one thing to keep in mind is the Benchmade Bailout has these liners that only extend to about here, about midway up through the scale, maybe a little less than midway up through the scale. That's important because when you take apart the disassembly here on another knife, that disassembly or the liners may extend farther out, which may affect how wieldy or unwieldy your disassembly is going to be. So you've heard probably people talk about the Omega springs that are in the Benchmade knives. Now this is the Omega spring right here. There's one on each side. You're not going to be able to see it because I've got this scale on already. But just take my word that there's one on each side. Now, there's the pivot here, so it has two parts of the pivot in the disassembly. It has the main pivot screw, whoops, don't want to lose that, which is a T10, I believe, and then it has the back side of this, which is essentially a Chicago screw, where it locks into a side that has a stem that extends up through here. And you can see the end of the step is the stem here. Now, I'm going to walk you through some of the things that made it difficult for me to put this back together, and maybe some of the strategies to help you put yours back together when you're doing it. So first of all, when you disassemble the Omega springs, you're going to pull the Omega spring off by pulling this forward over here. Same thing on the other side. And then you're going to slide it out through here after the blade is, you're going to pull the blade over here, out so that it's extended. And then you can pull the whole axis lock through the assembly out the back. So that's the way to take care of that. The difficult part of putting something like this back together is it really has nothing to do with the axis lock itself, but because the axis lock requires that in order for you to put the lock on, the axis lock on, it requires you to have both liners together. So what that makes it difficult to do is it makes it difficult to get the phosphor bronze washers that are in there to line up correctly with the blade and both liners all at the same time, because you can't first stack one on top of the other on top of the other. That would make it easy. But because this assembly has to be here, causing a sandwich of the two outer layers before you put the inner layers in, it makes it difficult, especially once you lube it up and it's got things sliding all over the place. One thing I will tell you is, I don't know if you can see, but there's a flat top over here on the pivot, the bottom half of the pivot screw. That flat top, it's like a D shape almost. It means that this is not perfectly round. So when you put it back in, it's not free spinning, first of all. And so when you put it back in, you need to line up those that flat spot with both liners. Okay, you don't need to worry about it with the washers or the blade, because those are full circle holes. But with the liners, you definitely need to make sure it's lining up. Otherwise, you'll never get it back through. Okay. One thing to keep in mind also is, as you're doing this, I found that the easiest way to get the blade and the washers back into the liners is to pinch the liners this way to create more space. And then also, while doing that, take some tweezers or something, and you can stack the push the pivot up, stack one washer on top, then push the pivot up a little bit more, stack the blade on top of that, push the pivot up a little bit more, put the other washer on top of that, push the pivot up the rest of the way, and then into the other liner. Now, how do you get that in there? My hands are too big, so I use some tweezers. Now, this is a Leatherman Micra. Tweezers come on a Leatherman Micra, so I'm glad I had them. Otherwise, I'd have to go find another pair somewhere. But you really need something like tweezers in order to get in there and to just have the right tool for the job to get it done quickly. Anyway, that's the main things to know about this in assembling or disassembling the knife. One other thing is that when I put the blade in during the assembly, I put the blade in where it's out this side, where it's open. And I just found it easier to do that because you place it up against the stop pin. It gives you some place to stop it from extending. So that was definitely a much easier way to deal with that. But once you go to get this top liner into the pivot, I had a hard time getting it through until I decided to close the blade. Then once I closed the blade, just like that, it went right in. So I hope this is helpful to some of you guys. If you have any other tips or anything for someone taking apart an axis lock, leave them below in the comments section. Otherwise, see you guys next time. Thanks for watching, okay? Don't forget to hit like and subscribe.